Bob Marley, next on Black Nouveau. Hello, welcome to Black Nouveau. I'm Milton Dockery.
And I'm Faith Polis. On this edition, we'll talk with the author of the new book on reggae superstar, Bob Marley.
We'll also have a profile of Legacy Benny. And we'll continue our discussion on Haiti's importance to the black community.
But first, the art of Amos Kennedy Jr. His poster art is currently on display at Red Line, Milwaukee. Everett Marshburn has that story.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved like a tree.
Social justice is just, I think it is a part of my makeup. You know, I grew up in the 60s when there was a completely different environment in America, where social justice, where the need for justice really did exist. And so I think that's embedded in me. And my parents embedded the idea that all people are equal and that you must help when you can.
Amos Kennedy Jr. is a printing press artist with an international reputation. His posters speak to social, political, and racial issues.
Some of my best pieces, I really like things that I've done related to the civil rights movement. I did a whole series summer before last to accompany work from Alabama that was on exhibition in Italy. And they had a series of photographs that were taken during the Selma to Montgomery March, especially the Bloody Sunday. And I did a series of that, and that's where the maps came from that project. There is still a need for justice, but I think that in the American society there has been a lack of attention to justice, and commercialism has trumped the social nature. I tell people that we have become a nation of consumers, not citizens.
Kennedy gave up the comforts of the corporate world to pursue his craft.
What I do is letterpress printing, and until the late 60s, letterpress printing was commercially viable. And so there were many shops, say in Milwaukee, that did letterpress printing. But by the late 60s, offset printing became the commercial way of printing, so letterpress fell out of favor and the equipment became available to artists. For a number of years I had practiced calligraphy, but the problem I had with calligraphy is I would do a very long piece, and when I get to the last line I would misspell a word, so I'd have to start all over again. And then in the late 80s I took my two sons to Williamsburg, and there I saw letterpress printing in a shop, and I wanted to do it. And we got back to Chicago, and I found a place that would teach it, a place very much like Red Line, a community print center. And I took a course, and I tell people it's like falling in a hole. Gravity takes care of you after you take the first step.
His work stirs emotions and encourages viewers to think in different ways.
My favorite pieces are the ones that sell. So the one that you buy today will be my most favorite piece today. But I enjoy doing them. One of the things that I enjoy most is when I print, I do it with such randomness that no two posters are the same, the backgrounds on them. So what I really enjoy is looking at all the posters at once as they scattered across the shop, because there's a similarity but difference, and that is what makes the world. We are all the same because we're all different.
Although he enjoys an international reputation, he often refers to himself as a humble Negro from the South.
Actually, I'm not a Negro. My birth certificate says I'm colored. Both my parents were colored. I was born in Louisiana. And on my birth certificate it says father, race colored, mother, race colored. So that makes me officially in the state of Louisiana colored. And I tell people I was born colored, I was raised Negro, I was educated black. So I have this thing going on. But don't call me an African American, because I don't like that term. I prefer the term Negro because there's a strength in the term Negro. And the term African American, again, I think when you think of Negroes, you think of the civil rights movement, you think of the struggle. And you think of a sense of community, because we were all oppressed and we had to get this oppression off of our back. Even if you were a doctor in the South, you had certain things that you couldn't do. You were treated, a doctor with a PhD, as Malcolm X said, is just a nigger with a PhD. And so we had to, we had this unifying factor that I think has been lost after the surface struggle ended. There's still a struggle, but we don't recognize it because it's not blatantly in your face, such as there's the black water cooler, here's the white water cooler. It's more subtle, and we've kind of lost it.
His posters are not expensive because he wants to make them accessible to the public.
Art is a public thing. It is not the exclusive domain of the wealthy. That we all make art, we all are creative, and that you should express your creativity at all times. You are as much an artist as I am. Just make stuff and have fun enjoying doing it.
His exhibit will be on display at Redline Milwaukee through the 5th of March.
While the current crisis in Haiti has kept that nation in the news, there is a unique historical connection between Haiti and the African American citizens of the United States that is too often overlooked. Joining us to discuss Haiti's importance to our community is Dr. Patrick Bellegarde-Smith, professor in the Africology Department of UWM. Dr. Bellegarde-Smith, welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Bellegarde-Smith, what is the historical connection between Haiti and the United States?
It's been profound from the very beginning. In 1804, when Haiti declared its independence on January 1st, it was decided by the Haitian power structure that all enslaved Africans, wherever they may be, could come to Haiti and claim citizenship immediately. And this is something, Badu, that was picked up much later in 1948 with the State of Israel with regards to Jews around the world. But Haiti had that interesting concept that freedom ought to be universal, and that's what Haitian independence was fought about. 1776 was not about universal freedom, neither was the French Revolution of 1789. But the Haitian Revolution of 1791 was predicated on the notion of universal freedom. So any black person, wherever he or she may be, could claim Haiti.
What role did Haiti play in the Louisiana Purchase?
A very significant role, which is usually ignored in terms of American textbooks, unfortunately, in the very same way that the Haitian Revolution is usually ignored. In 1803, Napoleon, seeing that he had lost Haiti for all intents and purposes, was essentially forced to sell Louisiana, the Louisiana Territory, to the government, to Thomas Jefferson, who wanted that piece of land, of course, which doubled the territory of the United States and allowed its westward expansion later. Because otherwise you would have had a French Empire in the middle of the continent, and the U.S. would have found it most difficult to go all the way to the West Coast.
Dr. Bellegarde-Smith, is there a historical connection with the black community here in the United States and Haitian?
Oh, yes. The United States refused to recognize Haiti until 1862, and Abraham Lincoln finally recognized both Haiti and Liberia at the very same time. And the two first American envoys to Haiti were African American in days where African Americans were not diplomats in the United States. The first was Ebenezer Bassett, who was named right after the recognition of Haitian independence, and the second was Frederick Douglass. And the Frederick Douglass did some incredible work down there. And the State Department felt somewhat suspicious because he had espoused the Haitian cause. And so things got a little bit complicated after a while there. But he loved Haiti and made sure that people knew it.
Dr. Bellegarde-Smith, do you think the press has portrayed the present crisis accurately?
Not at all. I'm sure that their intentions are good. I'm sure that much of what happens in the mind occurs at the subconscious level. But I've been dismayed at certain facts as they are presented. For instance, it took several days for water and food to be distributed. The American government wanted to make sure that there were 10,000 U.S. soldiers on the ground before they started distributing water, on the basis that we expected a riot. And there was no riot for many, many, many days. In fact, people were helping each other, sharing what little food they had, taking care of each other. I was watching CNN, I was watching MSNBC around the clock, as a matter of fact. And what I heard was stunning. Where are the riots? We expect riots. Why don't we get riots? The riots are coming. We want riots. And when they occurred about 2 days ago, very briefly, it was all over the news. The riots have started. Well, no, the people were foraging for food. Mm-hmm. And they went into collapsed stores to get food. And they were called rioters. It reminds me of what happened during Katrina as well. Okay. There's a photograph of a white couple, young white couple, looking for bread, and it was, well, they are foraging for food. And a black couple doing the exact same thing were said to be looters. And so it never changes. It's the same story over and over again. But the problem is that people don't even realize they're doing these things. Okay. It is very, very ingrained. And those people have the best intentions, but they are not listening to themselves.
Dr. Bellegarde-Smith, in about 30 seconds, how are the relationships between Haiti and the United States in the area of immigration?
They're not good. In point of fact, it's been a disaster over the last 30 years. For one thing, the U.S. government has supported dictatorships after dictatorships in Haiti under the excuse that these were anti-communist governments. And certainly Haitians were trying to find a better deal. They were being persecuted politically at home, but we were not receiving them as we received the Cubans, for instance. But in point of fact, there's one distinction between Cubans and Haitians. Cubans are a lot lighter skinned than Haitians are. In fact, the first wave of immigrants coming out of Cuba were white Cubans of the upper class and the upper middle and middle class. It is only in the 1980s, under President Carter, that you had a wave of darker-skinned Cubans, and the U.S. was not pleased by that. Neither was the Cuban community here, which had said to the American public that Cuba was white. Haiti cannot claim any of this because all of us are black, and so it's very difficult to argue otherwise. It's every time Haitians attempt to land in the United States because of the fear of political persecution abroad, it's not worked.
Dr. Smith, Bellegarde-Smith, thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
I am a woman, I am an artist, and I know where my voice belongs. I am an endangered species, but I sing no victim song. I am a woman, I am an artist, and I know why don't you do something? Why don't you say something? Don't you know that people are watching? They're waiting. They're waiting for you to do something. Children are waiting too. Waiting for you to do something that just might save their lives. Silent for too long. And your silence will not save you. Silent for too long. And your silence will not heal you. Don't let your denial be deeper than your grave. for too long.
For 10 years, Legacy Bank has been helping to change the economic landscape of Milwaukee's Central City. With so many changes going on with banking and lending institutions, Legacy wants to ensure their customers are doing well. Lady Collins has that story.
This is amazing. The kids, the children?
Yes, at the school.
Here, since I said about these are pennies for Haiti, and these are they're from a school where the children collected these pennies. And we're gonna count the pennies for them for free, and then send the check to the Red Cross, right, for Haiti relief. I'm so proud of you guys.
The need for women and minorities to be able to have a bank that would understand their needs and be willing to put up the capital to get those businesses going and or sustain them is what brought about the formation of Legacy Bank back in July 1999. Their continuous hard work and dedication has brought them national recognition. In 2009, Black Enterprise named them the #1 financial service company in the United States. The co-founder and vice president, Margaret Henningsen, said the reason they started is where they have been most successful, in commercial and small business.
We're really proud of the fact that we have created or sustained more than 6,000 jobs in our community, that hundreds of small businesses that might not be in operation right now would not be here had it not been for Legacy Bank. I'm very proud of the fact that you can drive through our community and there's hardly a block now where you don't point to something that says Legacy Bank made that happen. And so we're real proud of that and excited about the fact that we've been able to make those types of changes in our community.
Legacy Bank has experienced a double-digit growth almost every year they have been open. Through partnerships and Legacy Bank's president, Dolores Sims, sitting on a National Community Bankers panel, Legacy Bank will continue to grow and to spur on new businesses in the community.
We formed a partnership with WEDA, Wisconsin Housing Economic Development Authority, a few years ago, and we're able to bring new markets tax credits into our state, over $300 million at this point, and we've been concentrating on those new markets tax credits because you can take those tax credits and almost triple the amount of development that can be done in your community, so we're working on those as well. And we are looking at creating more entrepreneurs in the city of Milwaukee. We recently started our own foundation, the Legacy Foundation, and we are in our second full year of fundraising for the Legacy Foundation. And the goal of that foundation is to fund programs that will create more entrepreneurs. And this country was built with the vision of entrepreneurs who started small businesses. Even the mega banks today, they all started the same way Legacy Bank started, on a corner somewhere, providing good quality service and loans and capital and advice to people in the neighborhood.
When Legacy Bank started, they had the same challenge as any new business starting up, and that was raising capital. They had to raise $5 million to open, and they did. Now they have a new challenge: expansion.
We do recognize that there's a need for us to expand, and probably will continue to talk about that. We are going to concentrate on keeping this location at Fond du Lac and North strong, growing our customers, continue with our wealth building and asset creation, and see what develops down the road. But we definitely will be looking at doing some expansion probably over the next 5 years.
February 6th is the birthday of singer Bob Marley. The VP Gallery in Milwaukee's 3rd Ward currently has a photo exhibit from a new book on the reggae superstar.
Another song of freedom is all I ever had. Redemption comes.
Bob Marley was a Jamaican singer and songwriter who died in 1981 at the age of 36. He is the most widely known and revered performer of reggae music. He is also the subject of a new book, Soul Rebel, an intimate portrait of Bob Marley by photojournalist David Burnett. I spoke with him at the VP Gallery in Milwaukee's 3rd Ward. David, you said Bob was really great. What did you discover about Bob that was great?
Well, he is a year older than I am. And at that time, I think I was 29 and he was 30. And I, as a 29-year-old photographer, I had worked all over the world. I'd done a fair number of things. I had never thought, even remotely, that I possessed any wisdom. I mean, I knew how to travel. I could take some pretty good pictures now and then. But wisdom was just not in my list. And as we sat that afternoon speaking with him, every time something would, the reporter would ask a question, and we were actually working as a pretty good team as a photographer and reporter, because his questions would let me kind of wander unnoticed and photograph. But I'm kind of listening in the background as I'm looking through my camera, and I'm thinking, almost every time he said something, I just think, this guy is really wise. I mean, he's 30, and he's just got it. He's got it figured out. It's great. I mean, you meet a few people like that in your life who really have a very good and complete understanding of who they are and what the world is about. And in this case, with Bob, I really got that feeling very quickly.
I think that feeling comes across very clearly in your photographs. And you've taken 1,000 photographs of other people throughout your career. Why a book on Bob Marley?
Well, it's one of those things that, as I've spent my whole life going from one story to the next and one event to the next, and Olympics, presidential politics, a lot of different things. At this point, I spent that week in Jamaica, and then the next year I traveled with Bob and the band on the beginning of the Exodus tour for about 4 days for a Rolling Stone assignment. And even though I thought I had a number of good pictures, I didn't really feel that in 2 days, or well, it was really more like 5 days, that I had enough to do a book. I thought, well, I know that sometimes you really need to spend weeks on something, and then you've got enough for a book. And I really, there were always like my favorite dozen pictures or so, which are really pretty much what are on the wall of the gallery here. But at the same time, I was just not quite sure there was enough to do a book. So what happened was, a couple of years ago, my daughter, who, as a matter of fact, my daughter Jordan shares a birthday with Bob Marley, February 6th. So that was like some other little signal.
Some kind of synergy.
There was a little signal there. And when she was living in the dorm at college, her sophomore year, I went to visit her after she'd been back in school for a couple of weeks. And she had spent part of that previous summer working at Contact Press Images, my agency in New York. And one of the things that they'd had her doing as a young intern was just take this stack of 8x10 prints and sort them this way and that. They were all the Jamaica pictures. So by the end of the summer, she knew every picture I had taken in Jamaica, every picture I'd done of Bob Marley. And when I got to school, a couple of months later, she grabbed me by the hand and started running down the hallway, and she said, Dad, come on, you got to see this. And we went to one of her friend's rooms, and on the wall of the friend's dorm room was this big poster of Bob leaning on the guitar. It's the picture that's actually the cover of our book. And she said, look, I know that's your picture, that Bob Marley picture. I saw it at the office, and that's yours. And her friend was kind of awestruck. She was like, oh my God, you actually met Bob Marley. And there was something in that moment that really touched me. These kids were born 5 years after Bob Marley died. And yet to them, he represented this kind of presence in terms of his music and his message that really resonated with these kids. And at that moment, I thought, I need to get off my duff and do something with these pictures. And then from there, I got in touch with a friend in Washington, and we put it together, and we got a book going. And that was the result of which is Soul Rebel.
It sounds like that was also a connection, your daughter introducing you to the pictures on the wall, that you realized there was another connection. You recognized that Bob Marley was wise, and you got this connection from the young people that were born 5 years after his music.
I think it was great about his music, and I am like the worst person to ask about music. I really I'm not schooled in it. I kind of know what I like. You know, I like moody blues. I like some stuff that, you know, old rock music from the 70s. But if I'm standing around in a theater line waiting to get in, or I'm on the subway going to work or something, pretty much what will kind of come oozing out of my brain will usually be No Woman, No Cry. Like in the absence of anything else going on, that song comes back. So I think in a funny way, we're all touched by the music or touched by the messages. And for me, there are a few of his songs that I have to say, you know, when I went to Jamaica, I didn't know anything about his music. You know, one of the great things about having my job is that you get to kind of start projects as a complete ignoramus and hopefully end up a little bit more educated by the end. And for me, just the chance to hang out with him and to hear some of the music firsthand was really a treat.
Wonderful. Thank you, David.
Before we close tonight, we want to remind you that there are many activities planned for African American History Month.
The Wisconsin Black Historical Society and Museum is sponsoring The Rebellious Ones, a weekly series highlighting some of Milwaukee's civil rights activists. You can get more information from their website.
And that wraps up this edition of Black Nouveau.
Remember, in the coming week, do something to expand your world. Good night.
Good night.